For all its beauty and splendor, the wilderness can be a cruel teacher. The open road in the United States has a way of calling to people. It promises freedom, reinvention, and the quiet thrill of watching the landscape change mile by mile. Road trips are where memories are made. They slow life down just enough for wonder to creep back in. But it's easy to trust the blue line on a screen. Easy to believe that a calm digital voice knows better than you do. Blind faith in navigation apps has led people into deserts without water, into mountains in winter, onto logging roads that disappear into the wilderness. Technology does not care if you survive the turn it tells you to make. Let's venture back to the savage wilderness where survival is earned, not given. This is Outdoor Disasters. For Amber VanHecke, her road trip would be a debacle. Amber VanHecke guided her car along the highway with the windows cracked, a warm spring breeze streaming in. It was early March of 2017, and Amber hummed along to the music on her radio, excitement fluttering in her chest. This solo road trip had been her dream for months, a grand adventure from her home in Denton, Texas, through the Southwest, Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico, and finally to the majestic Grand Canyon. She was 24, fearless and fiercely independent, a former Girl Scout who prided herself on her outdoor savvy. She had crisscrossed the country on her own to visit national parks like Yosemite and Yellowstone before. A long drive into the desert dusk didn't faze her in the slightest. In fact, she relished it. Preparation was Amber's forte. She had planned her itinerary down to the hour and even shared it on Facebook, so her family and friends would know her route. Stowed in the back of her trusty SUV were ample supplies: several gallons of water, a stash of granola bars and canned food, a first aid kit, blankets, enough to last a good while. Always be prepared was a mantra drilled into her from scouting days, and Amber took it to heart. She felt confident, well-equipped, and ready for anything. There would be one small decision made long before the danger revealed itself that would quietly seal Amber's fate. At a gas station on her drive toward the Grand Canyon, she stared at the pump in disbelief. The prices were steep. Amber traveled light and cheaply. Every dollar mattered. Her road trips weren't stitched together with hotels and roadside diners. She slept in the back of her car, counted miles, counted coins. Fuel was no exception. So she stopped early, 1/3 of a tank, just enough to get her farther down the road. She told herself she'd find cheaper gas somewhere ahead. It felt practical, sensible, forgettable. It was a choice she would come to regret. By the time she reached the south rim, the mistake was still invisible. The canyon opened before her in vast silence, a wound carved into the earth. Amber lingered at the overlooks, doing what everyone does when they first see it, letting the scale swallow her whole. But her trip wasn't finished. She had one more destination in mind: Havasu Falls. The conventional route would have taken nearly 200 miles from the South Rim village. Too long, too expensive, too much fuel. Then her phone offered another option, a shortcut. Google Maps traced a thinner line across the screen, cutting the distance by more than half. Willaha Road. Amber studied it for a moment. Dirt, yes, but passable. Her car could handle it. And more importantly, it would save gas. She took the gamble. What the app didn't tell her was what waited beyond the pavement. No towns, no services, no traffic, just a pale dirt road slicing through open wilderness south of the Grand Canyon, a place so empty it barely felt claimed by the modern world. Ranchers passed through. Off-roaders sometimes, and little else. Trusting the blue line on her screen from AZ-64, the main corridor to Grand Canyon, Amber turned onto Willaha Road. Plenty of back roads snaked through public lands surrounding national parks, and Amber had always believed that the unbeaten path held the promise of the best stories. But this time, the story wouldn't be a charming travel tale. It was about to unravel into something far darker. Unbeknownst to her, she was teetering on the edge of a harrowing ordeal, one that would test her mind, her body, and her very will to survive. This wasn't just a detour, it was the first step into a nightmare. As Amber trekked along a dirt road near Grand Canyon, she felt a twinge of uncertainty about her path. About half an hour later, Amber realized the road was getting rougher. The dirt track narrowed and rocks jutted up, forcing her to slow to a crawl. Scraggly desert brush scraped the sides of her car. She furrowed her brow and leaned forward over the steering wheel, peering through the dimming light. According to the GPS, a junction to a better road lay just a few more miles ahead. But with each passing minute, the route became more primitive. Little more than a pair of faded tire ruts through the grass and cacti. Her Honda lurched over a washout, jolting Amber in her seat. She winced and eased off the accelerator. A nagging doubt tickled the back of her mind. She glanced at her phone's glowing screen mounted on the dash. The GPS still confidently insisted this was the way. In hindsight, she would curse that moment, the moment she chose to trust the map over her own instincts. But right now, alone in the deepening evening, she clung to the hope that just beyond the next bend she'd find a smoother road or a sign of civilization. Another mile in, Amber's hope was faltering. The road simply wasn't there anymore. The GPS showed a line, but in reality she was staring at a fence in the road that was petering out into open desert. She came to a stop. Her headlights illuminated nothing but an old, worn wire fence. Heart thudding, Amber realized she'd been led astray into the middle of nowhere. A sense of unease crept in. She had driven far off the highway. There were no lights, no houses, not even the distant glow of a ranch or town. Only an endless expanse of sagebrush and shadowy mesas under the emerging stars. "All right, don't panic," she whispered to herself, hands gripping the wheel. She took a deep breath. Panicking never helps. She knew that intellectually, but a prickle of fear was making its way up her spine nonetheless. She decided to backtrack the way she came before it got too late. Gingerly, she executed a three-point turn on the narrow track, careful to avoid puncturing a tire on the sharp rocks. She reached for her phone to find the way back. No signal. The map vanished, leaving her alone with the road and her own judgment. Darkness pressed in from all sides. Her headlights swallowed only a few yards of dirt before the world dissolved into blackness. She slowed, straining to see where the road went, afraid of what lay just beyond the beam. Then her eyes dropped to the dashboard. The fuel needle was buried on E. Somewhere along the way, in her focus on staying on the road, she hadn't noticed it slipping lower until there was nothing left to give. The engine began to hesitate, its movements cautious and uneven, the unmistakable language of a car running on fumes. "No, no, no, no," Amber whispered. And then she remembered it. An old oil tank she had passed not long ago, rusted and alone beside the road, coaxing the car forward, every second feeling borrowed. Somehow, impossibly, she made it. She pulled in beside the tank and shut off the engine. Silence rushed in to fill the space. Crickets chirped in the dark. The metal ticked softly as the engine cooled, each sound echoing the finality of what had just happened. The car would not start again. The tank offered a small, hollow comfort, proof that humans had once been here, a landmark that might catch someone's eye. But beyond that, there was nothing. No lights, no roads, no help. Amber sat there, stranded in the Arizona desert, as night closed around her completely. Amber fumbled for her phone, her hands trembling as she stared at the screen. No signal. The familiar bars were gone, replaced by a stark X. She lifted the phone, waving it in the air as if height alone might summon a tower from the emptiness, but nothing changed. The truth hit hard and fast. She was utterly cut off, lost, alone. Her breathing quickened as panic crept in. "Okay. Think," she whispered, forcing the words out. Sometimes 911 still worked without service. It was a thin hope, but it was all she had. She dialed and pressed the phone to her ear, holding her breath. Silence. Then, impossibly, a faint ring, a crackle. A distant voice asked for her emergency. Relief surged so sharply it hurt, and then the call dropped. She tried again, nothing. A third attempt brought only a futile search for the network. The moment of connection vanished as if it had never existed. Panic flooded her. Amber collapsed against the steering wheel and sobbed, the kind of crying that comes when hope is offered and ripped away. The darkness outside pressed against the windows, the desert alive with imagined threats and real ones she couldn't see. For the first time, she felt truly helpless. Eventually, the tears slowed. She wiped her face and forced herself upright. Panic wouldn't save her. Survival required calm. Stay still, assess, plan. The desert cooled quickly as night settled in, and she pulled on a flannel and wrapped herself in a blanket, the car becoming both shelter and prison. She avoided turning on the radio, unwilling to drain the battery, and instead wrote in her notebook the date, the failed call, the fear, and a promise to herself that she would be okay. Writing steadied her. Outside, coyotes yipped in the distance. Exhaustion finally dragged her into a restless sleep. Dawn came on her second day. Amber woke stiff and disoriented, only for reality to settle back into place like a weight in her chest. She was still stranded. Daylight revealed her surroundings clearly now. Rolling red earth, scattered cactus and sage, low cliffs glowing in the early sun. It might have been beautiful once. Now it felt endless and empty. She pushed herself into motion. Panic wasted energy. Survival demanded structure. She inventoried her supplies carefully, about 5 gallons of water, modest food that could last weeks if rationed. She calculated portions in her notebook. 1 liter of water a day, 2 small meals. The plan calmed her. Breakfast was a few bites of a granola bar and a small cup of water. It wasn't enough, but hunger was safer than running out. Next came signaling. If anyone passed overhead, she needed to be seen. She found a wide patch of bare earth and began hauling rocks, working with grim focus. SOS looked too small against the desert scale, so she tore it apart and started again. Help. 4 letters. Bigger. Clearer. She dragged stones from farther out, sweat soaking her clothes as the sun climbed. By late morning, the word stretched nearly 10 feet tall, pale rock against red dirt. She stood beside it, breathless but proud. Someone would see it. They had to. The heat pressed down by midday. She retreated to the thin shade of her car, sipping warm water and splashing a little on her face. Rest brought fresh worry. What if no one flew over? What if the faint track led nowhere? Still, she kept working. She built a signal fire pit from dry brush and set her lighter nearby. She placed a small mirror within reach, ready to flash sunlight at any passing aircraft. By early afternoon, fatigue replaced adrenaline. The desert was unnervingly quiet, making her feel small and erased. She stayed busy to keep fear at bay, scanning the horizon from the hood of her car, searching for movement, dust, or metal glinting in the sky. There was nothing, only silence. That night before sleep, Amber recorded a short video. She tried to smile as she spoke about day 2, about the huge help sign, about having enough food and water. Her face on the screen looked tired and afraid despite her words. "I'm not giving up," she said softly. She shut the phone off before the emotion spilled over, curled into the back seat and whispered into the darkness, letting exhaustion carry her away. Morning on the 3rd day arrived, painted in soft pastels, but Amber woke aching, thirsty, and heavy with dread. She allowed herself only half a cup of water, forcing the rest away despite her body's protests. 3 days lost in the desert still felt unreal. Surely someone was looking for her by now. She climbed a low rise and scanned the horizon, shielding her eyes. Nothing moved. No engines. No dust. No aircraft. Just wind brushing her sunburned face and an emptiness that seemed to stretch forever. The thought settled quietly and cruelly. No one was coming today. Back at the car, loneliness wrapped around her. She stayed busy on purpose, adding to her firewood pile, scribbling day 3, no rescue yet in her notebook, even sketching a cartoon helicopter with a smile, a thin attempt at humor to hold herself together. As the hours dragged on, her resolve frayed. She began talking out loud, narrating her actions like a survival vlog. joking about rationing peanut butter in the wild. It helped, briefly. By midday, the jokes fell flat. Sitting in the open car door, staring at the barren land, a colder thought pierced her. What if I die out here? Would anyone even know? She pictured her parents receiving that phone call and broke down. No, she snapped aloud, wiping her face. You are not going to die. Desperation spilled out. She stood and shouted into the empty sky, I'm right here. The silence answered. She hurled a rock as hard as she could and collapsed to the dirt, empty and shaking. After a long moment, she forced herself up and opened her journal again, this time refusing to write about fear. She titled a page, My Unfinished Adventures, and listed everything she still wanted. To see the northern lights, to finish her degree, to surprise her sister, to live. When she finished, she hugged the notebook close, as if it could anchor her to the future. That night, the loneliness deepened. The desert felt unnaturally quiet, as though the world itself were holding its breath. Wrapped in a blanket in the back seat, Amber prayed for the first time in years. She prayed for strength, for her family's peace, for a sign, and most of all to be found. Stars glittered through the windows like 1,000 candles. Beneath them she drifted into restless sleep, fear lingering, but resolve intact. Day 4 dawned with heavy eyes and a tight chest. Amber had slept poorly, chased by dreams of distant voices she could never reach. Waking up still stranded felt like a blow. 4 days alone was an eternity. She forced herself into routine, checking the help sign, inventorying supplies, eating half a protein bar, and a few careful swallows of water. Her mouth stayed dry, her thirst constant, but she resisted. Every drop now belonged to tomorrow. Waiting became unbearable. She paced without realizing it, climbed the rise again and again, saw nothing every time. By midday, heat shimmered across the ground, and she crouched beneath the car's shade, conserving energy. She had just reached for lunch when a sound cut through the stillness. Low, mechanical, wrong for the desert, an engine. Her heart slammed as the sound grew louder. She bolted upright, grabbing her red bandana and running toward it, shouting until her throat burned. Cresting the rise, she saw a dusty pickup half a mile away, sunlight flashing off metal as it followed the faint track. She ran hard, stumbling, waving the bandana overhead, screaming and whistling through tears. The truck didn't slow. It rolled on, dust trailing behind it, heading toward a low rise ahead. If it disappeared, so would her chance. With one last burst of strength, Amber scrambled onto a rocky outcrop, scraping her hands and knees, and screamed again. The truck dipped behind the rise and vanished. The engine noise faded into nothing. She stood frozen, then crumpled, sobbing. That might have been her only chance for days. The walk back to camp felt endless. When she reached the car, she slid down beside the tire as the sun sank low. 4 days gone, still unseen. Despair tightened around her heart, then hardened into resolve. She remembered her training. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. That night, by a small fire, Amber prepared to leave. She wrote a note, sealed it, taped it to the dashboard. Day 5, 6 a.m., heading east to find help. She packed carefully, tied the red bandana to her pack, and recorded one final message, telling her family she loved them and that she was trying. When she lay down, she slept more deeply than she had in days. Tomorrow would be the hardest day yet, but it might also be the day she reclaimed her life. At first light on day 5, Amber was already awake, the sky just beginning to soften into pale pink as she tightened the laces of her boots with calm, deliberate movements. She shouldered her backpack and took one last look at the place that had kept her alive, the silent car, the massive stone help sign, the gray ash where signal fires had burned. She rested a hand on the hood of the car for a moment, a quiet promise to return with help, then turned east and began walking. The sun rose behind her, stretching her shadow long across the ground as she followed the faint track that had once led her astray. At times it barely existed, but it was easier than pushing through brush. She searched constantly for signs of civilization, a fence line, a power pole, anything. But the landscape never changed. Only rolling rises, scattered rocks, and desert plants clinging stubbornly to life. After an hour, her legs settled into a steady rhythm despite the weight on her back. She paced herself carefully, knowing exhaustion would be her greatest enemy, guessing she might manage 10 or 15 miles if she kept moving. Somewhere ahead, she told herself, there had to be cell service. Every few minutes, she powered on her phone only to see no service glare back at her. Each time, she shut it off to save the battery and kept going. The desert was silent except for the crunch of her boots and her own breathing. By late morning, the sun was punishing, heat shimmering off the ground as sweat soaked her clothes. She stopped beneath the thin shade of a mesquite tree, drank carefully and checked her supply. Nearly a third of her water was gone. It was acceptable, she decided, though the hardest miles still lay ahead. She ate a small handful of trail mix and pushed on. Doubt crept in as she walked. What if she collapsed out here, unseen and alone? But she forced the thought away. Fear wasted energy. Near midday, she checked her phone again with little hope and froze when a single bar appeared in the corner of the screen. For a moment, she thought it was a mirage. Then her heart slammed hard against her ribs. She climbed onto slightly higher ground, hands shaking, and dialed 911. The call hesitated, then rang. When the operator answered, the voice was faint and distorted, but real. Relief surged through her as she gave her name, explained she had been stranded for 5 days after running out of gas, and admitted she didn't know exactly where she was. She grasped at the one landmark she remembered, a sign for the Havasupai Reservation, somewhere south of the Grand Canyon, near Indian Route 18. The operator's voice cut in and out. Amber caught fragments, coordinates, got cut off, and rushed to add that she had limited water and needed help. The line dropped. Call lost flashed on the screen. She redialed frantically, walking in small circles with her arm raised, but the signal vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Frustration burned through her, sharp and familiar, but she clung to the words she'd heard: coordinates. If the call connected at all, maybe her location had been pinged. She had said 5 days stranded. That had to matter. Now she had to choose. If rescuers came, they would likely search near her car and the giant help sign. Trusting her instincts, Amber turned back. The return trek was brutal. The sun was merciless overhead as she tied her bandana over her head and rationed her remaining water with painful discipline. The hope sparked by the phone call carried her for a while, but fatigue soon reclaimed its grip. Her muscles burned, her head felt light, and the desert blurred into sameness. By mid-afternoon, she was down to only a few warm swallows of water. Her lips cracked and skin hot, telling herself she was close, even though she wasn't sure how close that really was. Then she stumbled, her toe catching a half-buried stone, and went down hard, scraping her palms against gravel. She cried out and sat shaking in the dirt, exhaustion finally breaking through. For a dangerous moment, lying down and closing her eyes felt tempting. "No," she whispered, forcing herself upright. She thought of her family, of the life waiting beyond this place, of the words she'd repeated for days. "I'm not giving up." With bloodied hands and aching legs, Amber rose, legs trembling, and began to limp forward, each step a battle against pain and doubt. The sun scorched her back as she pushed toward the only landmark she had left, her silent, stranded SUV beside the rusted oil tank. It had once been her shelter, her lifeline. Now, as the desert closed in around her, dread bubbled up, unsure if she was walking toward rescue or toward the place where car and tanker would now be her coffin and gravestone. Amber slumped into the car, her body aching from the brutal trek. Supplies were dwindling, enough for maybe a week if she stretched them, but she knew that clock was ticking. This couldn't go on forever. Something had to break. Either she would find a way out on her own or discover something. Anything to help her survive until someone came. Her thoughts looped endlessly back to that last desperate 911 call, the only sliver of connection she'd managed to make. Had it worked? Did they hear enough to find her, or would it vanish into silence just like before? That uncertainty gnawed at her. But then, late in the afternoon, Amber heard it at last. A faint thump, thump, thump carried on the wind. At first, she dismissed it as wishful thinking, the desert playing tricks on an exhausted mind. Then birds lifted suddenly from distant trees, scattering in alarm, and she froze, listening. The sound returned, stronger now, unmistakable, a helicopter. Adrenaline surged through her body, wiping away fatigue in an instant. There was no reason for a helicopter to be flying this low, this far out, unless it was searching. The broken 911 call had worked. Ignoring the protests of her aching legs, Amber pushed into a stumbling run toward the sound. She crested a low ridge and spotted it. A helicopter sweeping the desert a mile or two away, circling with purpose near where her car should be. From this distance, it was little more than a dark shape, but it was real and close. Her heart hammered as she waved both arms, even though she knew they couldn't see her yet. She fumbled for the mirror in her pocket and angled it toward the sun, flashing bright bursts of light in frantic rhythm. It was crude and uncertain, but it was all she had. She ripped the red bandana from her head, tied it to a stick, and waved it in wide arcs above her shoulders. The helicopter's sound grew louder, the beat of the blades echoing across the land, and then it turned, straight toward her. A sob tore free as she realized they had seen something. As it closed the distance, details sharpened into view. White and red markings, the Arizona Department of Public Safety emblem on the side. Search and rescue. Tears blurred her vision as the helicopter descended, dust exploding outward from its rotors. She staggered back, shielding her face, still waving until two figures jumped from the aircraft and ran toward her. Amber tried to run to meet them, but her strength finally gave out, and she collapsed to her knees, crying uncontrollably. One rescuer knelt beside her, steady and calm, his hand firm on her shoulder as he shouted her name. When she nodded, he smiled. "You're safe now," he said. "We've got you." They helped her to her feet and guided her toward the helicopter, her legs trembling beneath her. Before climbing aboard, she looked back at the desert, the tiny car, the stone help sign barely visible from here, and felt a shiver at how close she had come to being missed entirely. Inside the helicopter, wrapped in a thermal blanket, she watched the ground fall away, the evidence of her struggle shrinking beneath her. One rescuer told her she had done everything right, that her sign and notes had made the difference. Amber smiled weakly and said she hadn't been willing to give up. As the helicopter banked toward the hospital, the Grand Canyon appeared in the golden distance, vast and breathtaking, and Amber stared at it in quiet awe, knowing she was seeing it alive, from the sky, and that she would carry this moment with her forever. After a night in a hospital being treated for dehydration and sunburn, she was on her feet, exhausted but otherwise healthy. Her family flew out to embrace her in tearful hugs. There were apologies and there were so many grateful tears. Officials filled in some blanks. Her initial 911 call had been too brief to trace properly, and due to a miscommunication, no search was launched until her second call finally alerted them. Hearing that sent a chill through Amber. If she hadn't taken matters into her own hands and hiked out, she might still be stranded with no one on the way. It affirmed to her that her determination had truly saved her life. A day after she was rescued, bandaged but smiling, Amber finally made it to the Grand Canyon with her parents and sister by her side. They stood at the south rim as the sun rose, painting the canyon walls in a pink and orange splendor. Amber's eyes soaked in the view, tears slipping down her face. It wasn't just the beauty making her cry, it was the sheer overwhelming appreciation for life, for being there to witness this moment. In the weeks that followed her rescue, Amber allowed herself something she hadn't had in the desert: time. Time to recover, to breathe, and to fully grasp what she had survived. Healing came not only in rest, but in reconnection. Just 2 weeks later, ABC's 2020 brought Amber face to face with the people who had pulled her from the brink. Standing again with the Arizona Department of Public Safety crew who had lifted her out of the wilderness, the weight of that moment finally settled in. She hugged paramedic Edgar Bissonnette and pilot Jonah Neves, her voice thick with emotion as she thanked them for more than the rescue itself. During those terrifying first moments aboard the helicopter, she told them, Their jokes and easy calm had steadied her shaking nerves, reminding her she was safe. Both men brushed off the praise, but not the admiration. Bissonnette told her he was deeply impressed by her survival instincts, and Nieves echoed that what she endured was extraordinary. In a moment of gentle humor, they handed her a gas gift card, teasing that they hoped she would return to Arizona someday, this time with a full tank. Amber laughed, promising she would never let that lesson slip again, the laughter carrying both gratitude and humility. Back home in Texas, life resumed with surprising speed. Within days, she was back in class at the University of North Texas, sitting in lecture halls as if nothing had changed. The contrast was jarring. 5 days ago, I thought I was going to die in the desert, she said later, and now I'm trying to go to class. The normalcy felt unreal, like stepping into someone else's life. She reflected on the word that had always defined her spirit, Fernweh, a German term she once read, meaning an ache for distant places, a wanderlust. That longing for adventure was still within her. Surviving this ordeal hadn't extinguished it. If anything, it burned brighter, tempered with new wisdom. She would continue exploring, but she'd be smarter, carrying a personal GPS beacon next time, letting her family track her progress, never blindly trusting a navigation app again. Lessons learned, but her adventurous heart remained unbroken. The beauty of this country can be unforgiving. Deserts kill quietly. Mountains don't rush. Cold waits. Heat presses. Distance lies. When you travel, you're stepping into places that were never meant to be safe, only breathtaking. The joy of a road trip comes from meeting these places on their terms, not forcing your way through them because an app insists you can. Maps, preparation, and common sense still matter. So does humility. Turn around when something feels wrong. Fill the tank sooner than you think you need to. Tell someone where you're going. Look up from the screen and read the land. Your gut is older than any satellite. When a road narrows and the pavement cracks, when signs disappear, when daylight fades faster than expected, when the fuel light comes on and the next town feels too far away. Those moments are not inconveniences. They are warnings. Ignoring them is how adventures become emergencies. GPS doesn't feel fear. It doesn't feel heat, hunger, or isolation. It doesn't see the storm building ahead or the fuel gauge sinking toward empty. It will guide you onto roads that fade into sand, snow, mud, or nothing at all, and it will do so without hesitation. The road will still be there tomorrow. But if you surrender your judgment to a blinking arrow and ignore the quiet voice telling you to stop, you'll be driving straight into an outdoor disaster. If you've made it this far, please consider clicking those subscribe and like buttons. Want more outdoor disasters content? Check out these videos I believe you'll enjoy. Thank you for watching.